this is an interesting one here today. When I left work, my car was idling at about 900 RPM where it always idles, and then after my interstate travel where I may or may not have been bang shifting it beside another hard charging car, when I got off the interstate, my idle was significantly higher. So today we're going to address you know, kind of some of the things that can cause this to happen in a car, and you know, just kind of some of the things you can do to avoid it. But it seems like if you run a carbureted car, sometimes you'll have some carburetor issues that will kind of elicit a higher idle than normal. So anyway, without further ado, let's get our hood popped here and address the situation. All right, so diving into diagnosing this thing, the first thing I want to mention when you have an issue with your car of any sort, you know, the idle changes, some of the running characteristics change from what they were before. You don't want to go around and start adjusting things because you know, that's not the problem. It ran good before the issue. You don't want to be making adjustments because you're just band-aiding the situation and actually putting your carburetor further out of adjustment. Now, in my situation, I actually I have to drive through some residential and I didn't really want to be sitting there idling at 1500. I turned my idle screw down a little bit, but when I got home, you know, when I did it, I memorized where it was. When I got home, I set it back. So the carburetor is set up exactly how it was before I had the issue. Again, you know, you don't want to go jumping around with that. Some of the things to look for is you want to look for some things binding up. So is your choke binding up? I have mine. It's a manual choke and it's definitely open. We got no issues there. The cam isn't holding the throttle open at all. Looking at the throttle here, the throttle doesn't seem to be binding. You always want to consider that when you set up your throttle linkage. You know, you don't want it to be binding up in any way. You want to kind of set it up so you can open everything all the way to full travel, and you don't have any of your return spring binding or throttle linkage binding, you know, because overall that's pretty dangerous. Now, another thing that could happen is your mechanical advance on your distributor could actually be binding up. So we're going to get a look at that really quick here, which is a good opportunity for me because ever since I put this boot on here in the winter to protect against water getting in there and fouling out my ignition, which it worked tremendously well, I have not had this cover off. So anyway, let's pull this off and get a look here just to make sure. All right, so I think I actually tracked down my problem. As you see, I got the boot off here, the cap off and the rotor off, and if you notice, we're missing one of our advanced springs. So what the springs do is they kind of you know, the heavier the spring, the more high RPM it takes for the centrifugal force of these weights to adjust the rotor, which advances the timing. But as we see here at idle, you know, I was probably having some timing advance, and with more advance, to some degree, you'll have your, it'll increase your idle. So anyway, I see the guy kind of hanging down in there, stuck to the magnetic pickup. But as we can see here, it's probably good to get in here and clean this out, as it's pretty darn corroded up for, you know, it's been about 4 or 5 months. And I think we might even replace this stuff since I'm going to run this thing on power tour. But anyway, I guess that's my solution here, but we'll talk through some of the other issues that can come up as well. This is, I'd say, the most uncommon one, but surprisingly it turned out to be the case here. But there's other things on the carburetor we can check. So let me grab that spring, hook it back up, make sure it's good and seated so this doesn't happen again. I'm going to scrape my corrosion out of here with some sandpaper, at least for now, or the end of a knife. So at least this is clean, and I'm confident in this, but I'm definitely going to get a new cap and rotor before I continue on. And anyway, then we'll move on from there. So I'm sure you all noticed this first off, and since I was talking into the camera, I really didn't take a good look right off the bat. But as you can see, why it failed is because the spring actually snapped. So over time, you know, the springs getting pulled open and whatever from the advance, the springs are going to fatigue, and you can have stuff like this happen. I've actually never seen this happen my whole automotive career. Definitely unique, but this distributor and car, I've put 20-some thousand miles on. It had a significant amount before that even. So anyway, we're going to dig all that out of there and get us a new spring and then put this all back together. So good opportunity to replace quite a few things, I guess. So for now, I got a set of springs in here. They aren't necessarily for this distributor, but they'll work to get me around until I can get those ordered in. I tried to clean the corrosion out as best I can again until I get another cap ordered in. But it's pretty interesting. Distributors, when they're running and all the electricity that's flying around in there, they almost make their own sort of an atmosphere. And if you've ever seen a clear cap, you can kind of see this. And you know, if you get any moisture into that, it'll really elicit a lot of corrosion. So I had a lot of issues with that before where it would foul it out, but ever since I ran this boot on here, which is a factory Ford deal, so Ford must have knew with putting a distributor up in the front they'd have issues on daily driven vehicles. But anyway, I think we got this corrected. We'll put it all back together and go on to the carburetor. So moving on to the carburetor here, some of the things that you want to check if you don't have any linkage binding, you don't find any ignition issues like I found, is you want to check all your vacuum lines. Generally over time, vacuum lines will get hard. You know, they're sitting on the hot intake engine bay. They'll get hard and they'll crack, and you'll have a vacuum leak. And especially these plugs have a tendency to crack and break when they're the original ones to the carburetor, because they're rubber and they really just do not last long. Now, I like running these nylon units here, which you can get at your local O'Reilly's or whatever for, you know, you get a good assortment of them, cost you about $2, and they never seem to fail on me, or at least they last a heck of a lot longer than the rubber ones do. So that's something to look at too, always your rubber plugs as well. But anyway, what I like to do again is pull all my hoses off like such, and then plug them with a plug like you saw with the nylon deal there. And then if you're not super concerned about your health, I like to take these hoses off and blow down into them. And if you can blow air through them, obviously either the line or the component, like this is the brake booster line, is severed, and it's when the engine's running under manifold vacuum, it's going to be sucking air. So again, you want to check all your lines over real well. Another thing to consider is your carb base gasket and how tight your carburetor is. A lot of people over tighten these and actually you know, warp your base plate, which is what I see more often than not. But anyway, you just want to make sure they are tight. You know, they just need to be snug. You don't need to go gorilla arming those things on, which I always try and express in my carb videos, because that's how you ruin carburetors. But you just want to make sure that your carb base gasket is in good shape, not deteriorated. You know, if you've taken your carburetor on and off a lot and you've put some pretty good wear on that gasket, and you might want to think about getting a new one just for good measure anyway. So just doing a final overview here and touching on some symptoms that are indicative of some pretty good vacuum leaks are, you know, if your car's idling high and when you rev it up, it's slow for that idle to come back down. Usually it's if your car's pretty snappy, but if that idle comes back down not quite as fast as it used to, usually you have a vacuum leak. And you know, a lot of cars will run and drive like this, and that's why people are tempted to adjust it out via the carburetor, which is the wrong way to do it. You know, a small vacuum leak isn't going to play a huge factor when you're into the throttle, so it's going to be hard to tell. But overall, that's not how your carburetor is designed to be set up, and you're just going to, you know, in serious cases, hurt your engine over time. In worst cases with vacuum leaks, you know, it'll be a big vacuum leak, so it's really leaning out. It's going to suck air through the path of least resistance, which will oftentimes be through, you know, a split hose. So oftentimes we get into the power, it'll be really lean stumble, and it'll run pretty poor. Now, in super intense cases where, say, your fuel pump's going bad, your fuel filter is dirty, you know, it'll hardly run at all. And a good way to check things of that nature is to just pull a side plug and run it and see if the fuel is where it usually is. So that was one of the first things I checked, and I forgot I mentioned I did take a look at that briefly. But these Summit carburetors are really nice because they got those glass sight plugs, so I can kind of see the fuel flow as it's running. Now obviously I'm on a little bit of an incline here, so it appears that my float's sitting a little low, but you know, when it's flat, it's good and level. And again, you know, it's always a good idea to have your carb floats set to where they're supposed to be. So overall, that's pretty much all I got for you guys today. Again, I just want to express that you do not want to try and adjust the issue out with your carburetor. If it ran well before and then all of a sudden you're having an issue, adjusting the carburetor is never the answer. because again, obviously it was right before, so you have another underlying issue that even if you can adjust it out with your carburetor, you're band-aiding it. It's not the right way to go about things. You know, you're just really messing with your air-fuel ratio and really doing things you don't want to do, and in worst cases, you'll end up permanently damaging your engine. So anyway, I hope this was helpful, and I got the Rot Stang back on the road, and it's about 3 or 4 days to power tour, and I think we're ready to go. So I figured I better show this here just to prove that I did indeed fix the problem. We're idling here with a good 700, 800 RPM idle. We made no adjustments to the carburetor other than what you saw that we did with our distributor there, which obviously that was an issue. And now we can sit at a stoplight without sounding completely obnoxious, and our ignition timing's right, and I'm confident that it's good to go.